The man I loved died on the way home from our wedding, but my mind refused to let him go. For 42 years, I lived beside a ghost. And when I finally died, I woke up in another world where he was waiting for me again. Westbridge University looked less like a school and more like a place where rich parents dumped their emotionally constipated children to learn business jargon and cocaine etiquette. Cale Mercer hated it instantly, especially the law students. They walked around campus dressed like tiny divorced businessmen carrying trauma in leather briefcases. Cale sat on the fountain edge outside the humanities building, chewing cheap gum while glaring at the crowd like someone owed him money. Technically, several people did. "You skipped economics again," Maya said, dropping beside him. "I attended spiritually. You threw a paper airplane at the professor. He caught it. Participation happened." Maya rubbed her face. "One day you're getting expelled. One day I'm dying dramatically in a parking lot. Let me enjoy the journey." That was when shouting erupted near the central stairs. Cale turned. 3 business majors surrounded a freshman boy against the railing. The smallest one looked terrified. The tallest rich idiot shoved the freshman again. "I said move." Cale sighed deeply. Human beings. Nature's least impressive group project. He stood. Maya grabbed his sleeve immediately. "No. Yes. You promised me no fighting this week. I promised no stabbing. That is not better." Too late. Cale crossed the courtyard with murder already glowing in his eyes. "Hey," he called lazily. The group turned. Cale pointed at the tallest guy. "You look like your father introduces himself by net worth." The freshman nearly choked. The rich boy frowned. "Who the hell are you?" "Local disappointment." "Move." The guy laughed and shoved Cale lightly. Very lightly. Unfortunately for him, Cale Mercer had the emotional regulation of a lit match near gasoline. Cale punched him immediately. The courtyard exploded. Students screamed. Someone pulled out a phone. The rich boy stumbled backward, clutching his nose, while Cale tackled another one into a bench hard enough to crack wood. "You insane bastard." "Yes," Cale snapped. "Next question." A fist flew toward him. Cale ducked smoothly and slammed his elbow into the guy's ribs. Then suddenly, a hand wrapped around Cale's wrist mid-swing. Strong. Cold. Still. The entire courtyard went silent. Cale looked up. Adrian Vale stood beside him in a perfectly pressed black coat, expression calm enough to belong at a funeral instead of a campus brawl. Tall. Sharp-faced. Dark eyes unreadable. The kind of handsome that looked expensive. Cale hated him on sight. "Let go," Cale said. Adrian studied the bleeding rich kid on the ground. Then the shattered bench. Then Cale. "You throw punches before conversations," Adrian said quietly. Cale yanked his wrist free. "Conversations are slower." One of the injured boys immediately pointed at Cale. "He attacked us." Adrian glanced at them once. "Were you harassing the freshman?" Silence. Interesting silence. Adrian nodded faintly like he already knew. Then he looked at the crowd filming. "Delete the videos." Nobody argued. Which told Cale everything. Money. Power. Fear. Cute combination. Cale scoffed. "What are you, Batman with a trust fund?" A few students gasped. Maya whispered from somewhere behind, "Please stop speaking." Adrian's mouth twitched slightly. Not a smile. Almost worse. "You're Cale Mercer," Adrian said. "And you're creepy for knowing that. You punched a professor last semester." He touched my shoulder aggressively. "That's not a legal phrase." "It should be." The injured rich boys quickly escaped while campus security finally arrived too late to matter. Useless as usual. Humanities decorative furniture. Adrian looked at Cale one more time before turning away. "You should ice your knuckles," he said. Cale blinked. "That's your goodbye?" "You seem difficult to kidnap," politely. Then Adrian walked away. Cale stared after him. Maya slowly approached. "Did Adrian Vale just flirt with you?" Cale snorted. "That man has the emotional range of a marble countertop." Unfortunately, he kept thinking about him anyway. 3 weeks later, Cale accidentally ended up in Adrian's apartment. Accidentally, meaning he followed Maya to a study session for free food and discovered Adrian sitting at the dining table wearing glasses. which honestly felt illegal. Cale dropped into a chair across from him. You live like a serial killer who respects interior design. The apartment was spotless. Dark wood, floor-to-ceiling windows. Silence heavy enough to hear breathing. Adrian didn't even look offended. You broke into the chemistry building last year. I was curious. You released lab mice. They yearned for freedom. Maya whispered. Please marry already so society can suffer properly. Cale threw a chip at her. Adrian calmly caught it without looking. Annoying rich bastard. Hours passed strangely fast after that. Cale expected Adrian to be arrogant. Instead, he was patient. Sharp. Quietly funny in the driest possible way. When Cale insulted a corrupt politician on television, Adrian murmured, careful. That man donates buildings. Cale snorted. Then he can donate himself into traffic. Adrian actually laughed. Small. Real. It hit Cale harder than expected. Later that night, rain hammered against the windows while Maya left to answer a phone call. Cale wandered toward Adrian's bookshelf. You actually read all these? Yes. Voluntarily. Adrian stepped beside him. You sound horrified. I thought rich people just bought books for decoration. I thought you only communicated through threats. Cale grinned. I contain layers. You contain criminal charges. Potentially. Their eyes met. Something shifted. Dangerously. Cale looked away first. Bad idea. Very bad idea. Because Adrian Vale was beautiful up close. Not soft beautiful. Controlled beautiful. The kind that looked terrifying when angry. Cale suddenly understood why people avoided him. Not because Adrian was loud. Because he wasn't. You're staring, Adrian said quietly. You're unfortunately symmetrical. Adrian's expression softened almost invisibly. Then Maya returned before the atmosphere could become illegal. Cowardice saved civilization once again. The rumors started 2 months later. Cale and Adrian together. At first people laughed. Impossible pairing. The university prince and the scholarship delinquent. Then someone saw Adrian waiting outside Cale's literature lecture in the rain holding coffee. Then someone saw Cale asleep on Adrian's shoulder in the library. Then came the fight. A senior mocked Cale openly at a campus gala. Careful, Vale, the guy sneered. Strays bite. Cale stood immediately. Adrian stood faster. The room froze. Adrian adjusted his cufflinks slowly before speaking. If you mention him again, he said calmly, I'll bankrupt your father before breakfast. Silence. Absolute silence. Cale stared at him. The senior turned pale. And Adrian simply took Cale's hand and walked him out of the ballroom. Outside, cold air slapped Cale awake. What the hell was that? He asked. Adrian looked genuinely confused. An appropriate response. You threatened economic murder. He insulted you. Cale barked out a laugh. Then suddenly stopped laughing because Adrian was still holding his hand. Firm. Certain. Like it belonged there. You're insane, Cale murmured. Adrian stepped closer. Only about you. Cale's heartbeat stumbled. Disgusting. Romance really was just mutual psychological damage with better lighting. Adrian touched Cale's cheek gently. No hesitation. No shame. I love you, Adrian said quietly. Simple words. World-ending effect. Cale stared at him for a long moment before muttering. You picked the worst possible person. Adrian's eyes softened. I know. And God help him, Cale kissed him anyway. Dating Adrian Vale felt a little like adopting a tiger. Most of the time he was calm, elegant, terrifyingly composed. Then somebody upset Cale, and suddenly Adrian started discussing financial destruction like a hobby. Cale found it deeply romantic. Concerning, but romantic. You know, normal couples watch movies together, Maya said while watching Adrian read through legal documents beside Cale on the dorm couch. Cale shrugged. We also do that. Adrian flipped a page calmly. Last week he threw popcorn at the screen because the protagonist made poor decisions. The man faked his death instead of communicating. You screamed for 20 minutes. I stand by it. Maya pointed at Adrian. And you just sat there staring at him like he invented oxygen. Adrian didn't deny it, which honestly should have worried society more. Cale kicked Maya lightly. Get out. You're disgusting together. You're single and bitter. I'm leaving before one of you starts reciting poetry. The door slammed behind her. Silence settled. Warm silence. The kind Cale never thought he'd have in life. Adrian reached over without looking and pulled Cale's legs across his lap automatically. Like habit. Like home. Cale stared at him for a second. Dangerous thing, tenderness. It sneaks up on people stronger than knives. You're staring again, Adrian murmured. You moisturize. It's suspicious. I'm dating a man who starts fights recreationally. Self-defense cardio. Adrian's hand slid absently over Cale's knee. Small touch. Soft touch. Cale felt it everywhere anyway. Pathetic. Absolutely pathetic. The first time Cale met Adrian's parents ended exactly how everyone expected. Poorly. The Vale estate looked less like a home and more like a museum dedicated to generational trauma. Huge chandeliers. Cold marble floors. Staff members moving silently like ghosts. Cale hated it before sitting down. Adrian's mother smiled the way rich people did when imagining your funeral. Cale, she said smoothly, we've heard quite a lot about you. That usually means something bad. Across the table, Adrian hid amusement behind his wine glass. His father spoke next. Direct. Sharp. Businesslike. You're on scholarship. Cale leaned back casually. Terrifying, I know. Education. You have no family. Nope. Very efficient during holidays. Your record includes assault. That one's fair. Cale, Adrian warned quietly. Cale pointed lightly. See? He supports honesty. Mrs. Vale set down her fork with precise irritation. You don't seem concerned about your future. Cale smiled thinly. Lady, I spent half my childhood wondering if the electricity would survive winter. Your son is the first future I've ever had. Silence. Adrian's gaze shifted instantly toward Cale. Something softer. Something almost aching. Mrs. Vale recovered first. Our son requires stability. Cale snorted. Your son threatened to ruin a politician because they interrupted our lunch. That politician was corrupt. Cale turned toward her innocently. See. Stable. Adrian actually choked on his drink. Tiny victory. Then Mr. Vale finally said the real thing. The ugly thing. One day Adrian must marry appropriately. The Vale family line cannot end. The air changed instantly. Cale felt it. That old familiar humiliation crawling under skin. Poor boy. Outsider. Temporary thing. He looked down briefly before forcing a grin. Good news then. I'm very killable. Cale, Adrian said sharply. What? Your father's basically interviewing replacement husbands already. Mrs. Vale sighed tiredly. You misunderstand. This is not personal. Cale laughed once. Cold. It's always personal when rich people decide who deserves love. The dinner collapsed after that. Voices rising. Adrian defending him immediately. His father growing angrier. His mother calling the relationship selfish. Cale finally stood. You know what's funny? He snapped. You people keep acting like Adrian belongs to your bloodline before he belongs to himself. Enough, Mr. Vale said coldly. No, Adrian said. The room froze. Adrian stood slowly beside Cale. Calm. Controlled. Dangerous. If you insult him again, Adrian said quietly, I leave this house permanently. His mother stared at him. For him. Adrian answered instantly. Yes. Cale's chest hurt suddenly. Terrible timing for emotions. Human hearts truly are useless little drama queens. The attacks became subtler after that. Internship offers disappearing. Scholarship reviews suddenly delayed. Rumors spreading across campus. Gold digger. Attention seeker. Social climber. Cale fought every single one. Literally sometimes. One business student mocked Adrian openly during lunch. Must be embarrassing, the guy sneered. Dating charity work. Cale launched across the table before logic could arrive. Chairs crashed. Someone screamed. Adrian grabbed Cale around the waist while the other guy bled dramatically onto expensive pasta. You can't keep committing violence every time someone insults you, Adrian muttered while dragging Cale away. Cale struggled furiously. He called me charity work. You broke his nose. He still has another one. Adrian pressed his face briefly into Cale's hair. And suddenly his voice turned soft. Dangerously soft. I don't care what they say. Cale stopped moving. Adrian pulled back slightly, eyes steady. You are the best thing in my life. That should not have worked so well. Cale hated that it did. You're really bad at choosing people, he muttered weakly. Adrian kissed his forehead. I know. Winter arrived hard that year. Cold winds. Gray skies. And another disastrous Vale family dinner. This one ended with Mrs. Vale finally snapping. You cannot build a future like this, she shouted. What happens in 10 years? 20. What about children? What about heirs? Cale went still. Very still. Adrian immediately noticed. Mother, he warned. But Cale laughed lightly first. Too lightly. Actually, Cale said, sipping wine, I already solved that problem. Everyone looked at him. Cale grinned lazily. If I were an Omega from one of those trashy novels, I'd just pop out a baby and everybody could calm down. Nobody spoke. Cale kept smiling anyway. Tragic news, though, he added quietly. I'm just a guy with anger issues. Something in Adrian's expression cracked. Tiny crack. Painful crack. Because they both knew. Cale would have done it. For him. If he could. Mrs. Vale looked away uncomfortably. Even she seemed ashamed. Adrian suddenly stood. We're leaving. Adrian, his father warned. No. The single word cut through the room like ice. Adrian took Cale's hand firmly and walked out without another glance. The moment they reached the car, Cale burst out laughing. Loud. Unhinged. Adrian stared at him. What's funny? Your mother looked like she saw a ghost. You joke when hurt. I joke when breathing. Adrian's jaw tightened. Then suddenly he grabbed Cale's face and kissed him hard. Fierce. Desperate. Like trying to silence every cruel word ever thrown at him. When they finally pulled apart, Cale's breathing shook slightly. You know, he murmured, you could still dump me and marry some rich girl. Adrian looked genuinely offended. I'd rather set myself on fire. Romantic. I'm serious. I know. That was the problem. Adrian rested his forehead against Cale's. Snow drifted quietly around them. And for one fragile moment, the world felt small enough to survive. Then Adrian whispered, Let's leave. Cale blinked. What? After graduation. We marry quietly. We leave the country. Start over somewhere no one knows us. Cale stared at him. The idea hit like sunlight through broken windows. Impossible. Beautiful. Terrifying. You'd abandon everything? He asked softly. Adrian smiled faintly. You are everything. Cale kissed him before his stupid heart exploded dramatically in public. Somewhere far behind them, inside that massive empty mansion, Adrian's parents watched the car disappear into the snow. And for the first time in years, fear finally settled into their bones. Because they realized something too late. If pushed hard enough, their son really would leave them forever. Spring arrived with terrible timing. Trees bloomed. Students flirted irresponsibly in public. Graduation approached. And Cale Mercer developed the deeply unfortunate habit of imagining a future. A dangerous hobby. One minute he would be walking across campus laughing at someone's terrible haircut, and suddenly his brain whispered, what if this is real? What if mornings stayed warm? What if Adrian always reached for his hand? What if love didn't disappear the moment life noticed him smiling? Disgusting thoughts. Absolutely horrifying. Cale blamed romance. And capitalism. Mostly capitalism. You're smiling again, Maya said suspiciously. Cale immediately scowled. Lies. You look happy. Insulting accusation. She folded her arms. You're planning something. Before Cale could respond, familiar footsteps approached. Steady. Measured. Annoyingly attractive. Adrian appeared beside them carrying coffee. Without asking, he handed Cale the exact drink he liked. Extra sugar. Less bitterness. Like the universe briefly apologized for existing. Cale narrowed his eyes. You memorize disturbing things. You pretend not to enjoy being taken care of. Maya gagged loudly. Please stop. You people act married already. Cale and Adrian exchanged a glance. Then looked away. Which told Maya everything. Oh my God. Cale pointed at her immediately. No. You are getting married. Shut up. You're actually doing it. Adrian calmly sipped coffee. Court marriage. Maya screamed. 3 students turned around. Cale buried his face in his hands. Human beings truly made joy embarrassing for no reason. The plan became simple. Graduate. Sign papers quietly. Leave. No giant ceremony. No family politics. No endless humiliation. Just them. Cale loved the simplicity of it. Maybe too much. He started imagining stupid things. A tiny apartment somewhere cold. Burnt breakfast because Adrian looked too distracting to focus. Arguments over groceries. Fighting strangers together. Growing old enough to complain about young people while secretly becoming worse. Terrifyingly domestic. One evening, Cale lay across Adrian's couch while Adrian worked through emails. Rain tapped softly against the windows. You know, Cale said lazily, if we leave the country, I'm absolutely becoming unemployed for at least 6 months. No. Yes. You'll get bored in 3 days. I'll become mysterious. You'll start fights in grocery stores. Cale pointed proudly. See, you know me. Adrian finally closed his laptop. Something serious settled into his expression. Dangerous expression. Quiet expression. The one that usually preceded emotional damage. I bought rings. Cale sat up immediately. You what? Adrian opened a small black box. Simple silver bands. Nothing flashy. Nothing dramatic. Just clean, steady warmth. Cale suddenly forgot how speaking worked. Which was rude. He enjoyed speaking. Usually loudly. They're temporary, Adrian said quietly. Until you choose something better. Cale stared too long. Long enough his throat hurt. You idiot, he muttered eventually. Adrian blinked. That sounded emotional. You're emotional. You're crying. Cale touched his face. Moisture. Traitorous moisture. Unacceptable. I hate you. You love me. Unfortunately. Adrian leaned forward and kissed his forehead gently. Tender. Easy. Like forever could fit into tiny things. You never have to fight alone again, Adrian whispered. That almost broke Cale. Because no one had ever said that before. Not once. 3 days later, Adrian's parents arrived uninvited. Naturally. Misery loves expensive tailoring. Cale opened Adrian's apartment door wearing sweatpants and irritation. Mrs. Vale froze slightly. Mr. Vale looked grim. You, Cale said. The seasonal villains. Adrian emerged behind him immediately. What are you doing here? His father's jaw tightened. We need to talk. No, Adrian answered. His mother stepped forward. Please. The word landed strangely. Soft. Tired. Cale exchanged a glance with Adrian. Eventually, reluctantly, they let them inside. Nobody sat comfortably. Nobody breathed normally. Cale stole fries from the kitchen out of spite. Finally, Mrs. Vale spoke. You're serious, she said quietly. Adrian didn't hesitate. Yes. You would truly leave? Yes. Silence stretched. Heavy. Ugly. Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Vale looked at Cale. Actually looked at him. Not through him. Not around him. At him. You love him, she said softly. Cale frowned. What gave it away? The years of emotional warfare. Her mouth trembled slightly. Not anger. Regret. We handled this terribly. Adrian stiffened. His father sighed heavily. We thought this would pass, he admitted. A university relationship. Rebellion. Cale laughed once. You underestimated your son's terrible taste. Adrian squeezed his hand under the table. Mrs. Vale swallowed hard. If marriage is what you want. Adrian blinked. Cale nearly dropped a fry. We'll support it, she finished quietly. Silence. Complete silence. Even Cale's sarcasm went on vacation. You're joking, Cale said carefully. No. Mr. Vale rubbed tiredly at his forehead. You were right about one thing. Cale narrowed his eyes suspiciously. Only one. Adrian belongs to himself. Something tightened painfully in Cale's chest. Too late. Too painfully late. But still. Something. Adrian looked stunned. Actually stunned. Rare event. like spotting emotional honesty in billionaires. His mother gave a small smile. We would like to attend. Cale blinked again, then immediately said, You know I'm still rude, right? Unexpectedly, she laughed. Small laugh. Real laugh. At this point, she murmured, I think the family deserves it. The courthouse wedding happened a week later. Quiet. Private. Perfectly theirs. No grand ballroom. No society headlines. Just papers. Witnesses. A tiny bouquet Cale claimed looked aggressively cheerful. Cale wore black because white felt suspicious. Adrian wore gray. Calm. Beautiful. Impossible. Standing there beside him like reality forgot its own rules. You look nervous, Cale whispered. I'm marrying the love of my life. That sounds stressful. You threatened the clerk 10 minutes ago. He judged my handwriting. Adrian smiled. God. That smile. Cale decided immediately he would commit crimes for it. The officiant cleared his throat politely. Simple vows. Simple promises. But when Adrian slid the ring onto Cale's finger, his hands shook. Tiny tremble. Barely visible. Enough to shatter Cale quietly from the inside. I choose you, Adrian said softly. No performance. No audience. Just truth. In every life, Adrian added, voice low enough only Cale heard, I'd still choose you. Cale swallowed hard. Damn him. Damn him for sounding like destiny. Cale slid Adrian's ring on next. You're stuck with me now, he muttered. Adrian smiled faintly. Good. When the paperwork ended, Mrs. Vale cried. Mr. Vale awkwardly hugged Adrian like someone relearning fatherhood from scratch. And when Mrs. Vale hugged Cale too, she whispered shakily, Take care of him. Cale blinked, then answered honestly. Always. Their honeymoon flight left in 2 days. Just enough time to drive back home, pack, and finally disappear together. The sunset burned gold outside as Cale climbed into the passenger seat beside Adrian. His new husband. Ridiculous sentence. Absolutely ridiculous. Cale stared at the ring on his finger again. Warm metal. Proof. Real proof. Adrian glanced over. You're smiling. No, I'm not. You are. Mind your business, husband. Adrian laughed softly. Cale loved that sound more than breathing. The road stretched ahead. Quiet. Safe. Golden. Cale leaned back lazily. You know, he muttered. Maybe in another universe I actually am an Omega. Adrian smirked faintly. You'd be terrifying. I'd weaponize pregnancy. You already weaponize everything. Cale grinned. Outside, headlights flashed briefly in the distance. Far too bright. Far too fast. Neither of them noticed. Not yet. The truck ran the red light at 70 miles per hour. Later, witnesses would describe the crash differently. Too fast. Too sudden. Metal screaming. Glass exploding. One woman said the sound haunted her for months. Cale remembered none of it clearly. Only fragments. Adrian's hand jerking toward him. A violent impact. Pain. Then warmth running down his face. And Adrian saying his name. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just once. Like he was trying to hold on to him. Then darkness swallowed everything. When Cale woke up, the world smelled like antiseptic and grief. Machines beeped nearby. His ribs felt shattered. His head throbbed violently. For several seconds he stared at the ceiling blankly before memory returned all at once. Wedding. Crash. Adrian. Cale turned sharply. Adrian. No answer. Panic clawed instantly through his chest. He tried sitting up. Agony exploded through his body. A nurse rushed forward immediately. Sir, please don't move. Where's my husband? The woman froze. Tiny hesitation. Tiny, terrible hesitation. Cale's stomach dropped. Where's Adrian? The door opened behind her. Mrs. Vale stood there already crying. Mr. Vale looked 20 years older. Something cold slid slowly into Cale's bones. No. 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 Adrian promised. Adrian promised. Mrs. Vale stepped closer shakily. Cale. Cale stared at her. Then suddenly laughed weakly. Small broken sound. You look awful, he murmured. Did he yell at you again? Nobody answered. The silence became monstrous. Cale's breathing turned uneven. No, he whispered. Mrs. Vale broke completely. And somehow that hurt worse than anything. Because rich women like her weren't supposed to cry openly. Not like this. Not destroyed. Cale looked toward the empty side of the room again. Then back at them. Then quietly asked, "Where is my husband?" Mr. Vale's voice cracked. He died instantly. Everything stopped. The machines. The room. The air. Cale stared at him without blinking, like the words were spoken in another language. Then suddenly he smiled. Softly. Relieved. "You're mistaken," he said. Mrs. Vale sobbed harder. Cale frowned slightly at her reaction. "Adrian's fine," he repeated gently. "We just got married." The doctors called it trauma-induced delusion. Severe psychological dissociation triggered by grief and brain injury. Cale called it annoying, because everyone kept insisting on impossible things, like Adrian being dead. Ridiculous concept. Adrian sat beside his hospital bed every evening reading quietly while Cale complained about the food. Obviously alive. Obviously listening. "These people are dramatic," Cale muttered one night while staring at the ceiling. Adrian glanced up from his book. "They're worried about you. They keep crying. You almost died." Cale frowned. "You're supposed to comfort me better." Adrian reached over and brushed fingers gently through his hair. "Warm. Real." "I'm here," Adrian whispered. Cale relaxed instantly. "See? Fine." Everybody else was just emotionally unstable. Months passed. Cale physically healed. Mentally, the world remained split cleanly in two. In one world, Adrian was dead. Flowers covered a grave. The Vale family mourned endlessly. Doctors watched Cale with quiet pity. In Cale's world, they were newly married, planning their honeymoon, still laughing together, still in love. And honestly, Cale preferred his version. Reality had terrible writing choices. The Vale family brought Cale home eventually. Not to some separate guest house. Not to a hospital. Home. Mrs. Vale personally prepared his room beside Adrian's old one. At first, Cale found that strange. Then he realized she liked hearing him talk. About Adrian. About imaginary conversations. About the future that no longer existed. One afternoon, Cale wandered into the kitchen barefoot while talking animatedly to empty air. "I told you pineapple on pizza is psychological warfare," he argued. Mrs. Vale stood frozen by the counter watching him. Cale turned toward her casually. "Adrian agrees with me." Her lips trembled. "Yes," she whispered painfully. "He would." Cale smiled and kept walking. After he disappeared upstairs, she finally collapsed into tears. Again. Always crying now. Humans really were 90% water and emotional damage. Years passed strangely. Cale never fully left his illusion. Therapy helped him function. Helped him eat. Sleep. Exist. But Adrian remained beside him in every moment. At university reunions, Cale still introduced Adrian casually. "He hates these events," Cale would whisper conspiratorially. People smiled sadly. Nobody corrected him anymore. Even Mr. Vale stopped trying. Because every attempt shattered Cale for weeks. And because somewhere along the way, the family understood something unbearable. Cale had not survived the crash either. Not completely. Part of him remained trapped inside that ruined car forever beside Adrian. One winter evening nearly 15 years later, Cale sat beside the fireplace reading while Adrian rested nearby. Older now. Both of them older. At least in Cale's mind. Mrs. Vale entered quietly carrying tea. Her hair had gone mostly white. Grief aged people cruelly. "You're awake late," she said softly. Cale shrugged. "Adrian's working." Her eyes flickered toward the empty chair beside him. Still. Always still. She set down the tea carefully. Then suddenly whispered, "I'm sorry." Cale looked up. Mrs. Vale's eyes filled with tears immediately. "For all of it," she choked out. "Every cruel thing I said to you. Every moment we made him choose." Cale stared at her silently, then looked toward Adrian. Adrian watched him quietly, gentle as ever. Cale sighed. "You know," he murmured, "he really loved you." That broke her completely. "I know." "No," Cale said softly. "You don't." The room shook with silence. Then Cale smiled sadly. He spent years trying to make peace between us because he wanted everyone together at the end. Mrs. Vale covered her mouth. Cale leaned back slowly. He got his wish eventually, just not in the way anyone wanted. Time kept moving anyway. Cruel thing. It never cared who got left behind. Cale grew older. Lines formed around his eyes. His hands became rougher. His hair silvered slowly. But every morning, Adrian still kissed his forehead before breakfast. Every night, Adrian still slept beside him. Invisible to everyone else. Perfectly real to Cale. Sometimes strangers stared when Cale spoke to empty air in public. Sometimes children whispered. Sometimes nurses looked sad. Cale never cared, because Adrian answered him. Always. Near the end, Cale became weaker quickly. His heart struggled. Breathing hurt. Mrs. Vale stayed beside him constantly now. An old woman carrying decades of regret. One rainy night, Cale lay in bed staring toward the window while thunder rolled softly outside. Adrian sat beside him quietly. Beautiful. Young again somehow. Like memory itself had smoothed away time. Cale smiled faintly. "You're glowing dramatically," he muttered. Adrian touched his cheek gently. "You're tired." "Little bit." Mrs. Vale slept nearby in a chair. Cale studied her for a long moment. "She loved you," he whispered. "I know. She loved me too eventually." Adrian smiled softly. "I know." Cale closed his eyes briefly. Pain faded strangely. Warmth spread through him slowly. Like drifting. Like sinking into light. Then suddenly he laughed weakly. "What?" Adrian brushed their foreheads together. "You finally became old with me." Cale's chest tightened painfully. Because somehow that felt like goodbye. "No," he whispered immediately. "Stay." Adrian's expression broke for the first time in decades. Raw grief. Ancient grief. "I tried," he whispered back. Cale froze. The room suddenly felt wrong. The air shifted. Cracks spread through reality itself. And for the very first time in 40 years, Adrian looked transparent. Cale stared at Adrian in horror. Transparent. Fading. No. No, that was wrong. Adrian was real. Adrian had always been real. The room trembled around him strangely. The walls blurred at the edges. Rain sounded distant now, like water falling in another world. Cale pushed himself upright weakly. "Stop doing that." Adrian's eyes softened with unbearable sadness. "Cale, don't." Cale's breathing turned sharp. "Don't use that voice." The voice people used when things ended. The voice doctors used. The voice funeral homes used. Cale hated that voice. Mrs. Vale stirred awake nearby. "Cale." But Cale barely heard her. Because Adrian was fading more every second. Like smoke caught in light. Like memory finally losing the war against time. Panic crashed violently through Cale's chest. "You promised," he whispered. Adrian looked devastated. And suddenly Cale understood. Not fully. Not cleanly. But enough. Tiny shattered pieces finally connected inside his mind after 40 years of refusing truth hard enough to break reality itself. The crash. The blood. The empty hospital chair. The funeral he never attended. The grief everyone carried except him. Cale's hands started shaking. "No." Mrs. Vale hurried toward him immediately. "Cale, breathe." He looked at her. Really looked at her. Wrinkled hands. Exhausted eyes. Decades of sorrow carved into her face. Not temporary grief. Not fresh grief. A lifetime of it. Then Cale looked back toward Adrian again. Still there. Still beautiful. Still his. But fading. Cale's voice cracked horribly. "I made you stay." Adrian smiled weakly. "You were lonely." Cale broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just one small shattered sound escaping his chest as 40 years of denial finally collapsed under its own weight. "I couldn't." His breathing hitched violently. "I couldn't survive it." "I know." "I tried not to remember." "I know." Cale laughed helplessly through tears. "You died and my brain said absolutely not." Adrian actually smiled at that. Tiny smile. Familiar smile. God, Cale loved that smile. Loved it enough to destroy reality for decades just to keep seeing it. Human beings were terrifying creatures when grieving. They could build entire worlds from refusal alone. Mrs. Vale quietly began crying behind him. Cale turned toward her slowly, and for the first time in 40 years, he finally asked the question honestly. How long has he been gone? Her face crumpled completely. 42 years. 42. 42 years talking to a ghost. 42 years loving someone so fiercely death itself couldn't fully take him away. Cale covered his eyes shakily. That's embarrassing, he whispered hoarsely. Mrs. Vale let out a broken laugh through tears. Even now he was still trying to make grief easier for other people. Cale looked back toward Adrian desperately. You stayed all this time? Adrian stepped closer. Or whatever ghosts did instead of stepping. You asked me to. Cale remembered suddenly. Fragments returning brutally. Hospital bed. Broken body. Begging Adrian not to leave. Again. 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 And maybe love was stubborn enough to answer. Cale's vision blurred heavily. His chest hurt less now. Actually, he couldn't really feel it anymore. Strange. Very strange. Mrs. Vale grabbed his hand tightly. Terrified. Cale. He looked at her quietly. Then smiled. Small. Gentle. The same way Adrian used to smile at him. You accepted me too late, he teased softly. She sobbed immediately. I know. But you did accept me. I loved you, she cried. Both of you. Cale squeezed her hand weakly. I know. And he did. That was the tragic thing. Love arrived eventually. Just slower than death. The room grew brighter. Not physically brighter. Something else. Something pulling. Cale looked toward Adrian again. Young. Whole. Waiting. Like the universe pressed pause just for them one last time. You know, Cale murmured weakly. This is still your fault somehow. Adrian raised an eyebrow. You punched at least 12 people defending me. Only 12. Possibly more. Cale smiled faintly. Then his expression cracked again. Raw fear slipping through. If I let go now. Adrian immediately took his hand. Warm. Real. Somehow real. You won't lose me. You died. And still came back. Cale stared at him. Then suddenly laughed softly through tears. That's annoyingly romantic. You loved it. I did. Mrs. Vale pressed trembling fingers against her mouth, watching him speak to empty air again. But this time, for the first time, the room no longer felt empty. Not to her. Maybe grief changed people. Maybe love lingered. Or maybe a mother who spent 40 years regretting cruelty earned one small miracle before the end. Because for just 1 second, she thought she saw someone standing beside Cale. Tall, dark-haired, gentle-eyed, and smiling at her sadly. Then thunder cracked outside, and the vision vanished. Cale's breathing weakened further. Slow now. Fading. Mrs. Vale leaned close immediately, terrified to lose him too. But Cale only looked peaceful. You should rest, she whispered shakily. Cale smiled. Nah, he murmured. I think I've slept long enough. Then he looked toward Adrian one final time, and softly said the words he should have said 42 years ago. You can stop staying now. Adrian's expression shattered completely, because even after all this time, Cale's first instinct was still protecting him, still loving him, still choosing him. Adrian leaned down slowly until their foreheads touched, and whispered, In every life. Cale closed his eyes, smiling. Then the monitors finally screamed. Darkness lasted only a moment. Then came scent. Warm. Sweet. Flowers. Smoke. Something unfamiliar wrapped around Cale violently. His body jerked upright, breathing hard. Noise exploded everywhere around him. Crowded streets. Voices. Wooden carts rolling across stone roads. Cale blinked rapidly. What the hell? His voice sounded younger. Completely younger. He looked down instantly. Different hands. Smaller waist. Long dark robes. And around him stretched an ancient city glowing beneath red lanterns and mountain mist. People moved past wearing traditional clothing. Some carried swords. Others whispered about alphas and omegas openly like it was normal. Cale stared blankly. Excuse me? Then suddenly, a scent hit him. Sharp. Cold. Dangerous. His heart stopped instantly. Across the crowded market, a man turned sharply. Tall, black robes, power coiled beneath stillness, beautiful enough to ruin lives, and golden eyes widened in absolute horror. Adrian. No, not Adrian. Someone else. Someone wearing Adrian's soul. The Alpha dropped the scroll in his hands. His breathing became uneven instantly, like recognition struck somewhere deeper than memory. Kale couldn't move. Neither could he. The entire noisy market faded around them. Then the Alpha whispered shakily. Kale? Kale's eyes burned immediately. You've got to be kidding me. The Alpha crossed the distance between them in seconds. Hands trembling. Eyes already red. Like he had been searching for centuries. Kale stared at him helplessly before laughing through tears. This universe really saw me mentally collapse for 40 years and said, Round 2. The Alpha pulled him into his arms desperately. And this time, Kale smelled rain, fire, and Alpha pheromones wrapping around him possessively. Real. Alive. Not a ghost. Not imagination. Real. Against his neck, the Alpha whispered brokenly. I found you again. Kale closed his eyes slowly, then muttered into his shoulder. You're still dramatic. The Alpha laughed shakily. And somewhere beyond worlds, beyond death, beyond grief itself, love finally arrived on time.